The way most people think about networking is an absolute waste of time. An entrepreneur will be unfocused for as long as it takes until they feel the pain of that lack of focus. The pain is the catalyst to rewire your brain to adopt a much more intelligent way of operating.
What would you say is like one of the toughest decisions you've had to make that has shaped who you are today?
We were losing about $600,000 a month. And I was 3 months away from losing $900,000 a month. It's the most distressed I've ever seen any business firsthand. In any goal that I set, or in any role like a CEO that I assume, the number one thing I'm trying to set everything up to achieve.
What's your view on work-life balance?
That's a very good question.
You got to invest money, don't you? A lot of people, they don't want to invest money to improve themselves.
The cheapest, fastest, and easiest way to build yourself and to build your network is to...
So, Jack Delosa, let's peel back 5 years, 10 years could be too far, to Jack Delosa today. I mean, I didn't know you 5 years ago, but how would you, or like, what are the key differences from more, I'd say, a leadership perspective that you recognize?
Just quickly, Benny, we're not going to follow the questions that you...
We are,
Yeah.
but I sometimes go
in a different order.
I sometimes go a bit impromptu.
Sweet.
So I should have actually, I'll
My head was somewhere else.
I'll tell you what. Let me. I should have told. I should have given you a warning. I go very rogue. So
Great. So I'm good with rogue. I thought we were. I thought, yeah, all good. I can rogue.
Let's start again. I'll take a different approach. Let me just make it. We'll go again.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I'll follow.
I thought you were going to ask me about.
No, I'll follow script. I'm going to follow
inner
script.
circles.
Yeah.
I can rogue. I just didn't think.
No. So I'm going to try and keep it. I do go very rogue.
Great. Let's do that.
So,
So long. Yeah.
But
If I know we're roguing, let's rogue.
but no, let's. I'm gonna start back and we're gonna follow. We're gonna follow kind of to script, but I'm gonna go a bit rogue. Okay.
Great.
Cool.
Perfect.
I want to deep dive into founder life.
Great.
There's no playbook for founders.
Correct. Yes.
We don't know what we're signing up for, do we?
I feel like these are leading the witness type questions. We definitely don't. You're correct.
It's an interesting journey.
It is.
For any founder that's listening to this, that's looking to, build an inner circle, like build a strategic network around them. Like, what do you suggest they do to execute properly, to really build that tight group of people where there's going to be good value exchange and it's going to benefit them? Because you can meet the wrong people.
Yes. The way most people think about networking is an absolute waste of time. And so I've always done the opposite to what most people do when it comes to building relationships. I essentially do two things. The first thing is I focus all of my effort and energy on building good businesses and good brands that customers love and that contribute to the world. Because in becoming somebody of value, particularly if you have any visibility around that value, then you will attract people into your world, or at the very least, when you reach out to them, they'll take the call. Secondly, I believe in building relationships with people who are further along than I am, people who are smarter than I am, people who have been doing it for longer than I have. And so what I do is I pay a hell of a lot of money to get in rooms with those people. And so everything I do is about building an attraction model where I'm visible and then paying exceptional amounts of money to get into rooms where I am the dumbest and most inexperienced person in the room, because that's ultimately how I've always elevated my network.
You and I paid some money recently and ended up in the same room.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're damn much else.
Case in point. Absolutely. There you go.
Yeah. And you've got to invest money, don't you? A lot of people, they don't want to invest money to improve themselves.
The cheapest, fastest, and easiest way to build yourself and to build your network is to pay ridiculous money to do so. If you muck around trying to go to free networking events or learning just from videos on YouTube or whatever it might be. And the videos on YouTube are fine, but it's actually cheaper when you take into consideration the revenue and the profit that you can gain, when you take into consideration the opportunity cost of the time that you lose trying to figure everything out by yourself. The best and cheapest and fastest way to build yourself and to build your inner circle is to pay money to do it. That's the accelerant.
Do you ever audit your social circle?
That's a very good question. I don't know if I do it consciously. What I've found is that as I've developed and grown, social circles will change according to the level that you elevate to. And so I don't know, I'm not a kind of, some people talk about, fire your friends and cut them out and all of that kind. I don't believe in that philosophy. I'm still really good friends with people I went to high school with, and I love them, and they're really true, authentic friendships. But undoubtedly, you do kind of elevate into new circles as you grow and develop, and I think that's really healthy, because the alternative to that is staying where you've always been, and in that place, it's really hard to grow.
You've worked a lot with business owners.
A lot,
fair to say. Why do you think founders typically fail?
Founders fail because they focus on the wrong things. The things that grow a business are not exciting, interesting, or novel. The things that grow businesses are the basics and the fundamentals. It's, are we generating a high volume of high quality leads? How quickly are we contacting those leads? What's the conversation we're having with those leads? What's our sales system for moving those leads from lead to sale, from curious to committed? Once somebody gets started with us, how do we onboard them in such a way that sets them up for a really strong experience with us and expands our lifetime value? Once they're going through our customer journey, how do we look after them and exceed expectations so that they never want to leave? And so in any business, there's 6 to 8 steps in the customer journey. It's usually really simple, and founders are really good at getting distracted with shiny things that aren't those 6 to 8 things. And so if I spend my life helping people come back to the fundamentals, the other thing is that while the fundamentals are simple, as you know better than anybody, they're definitely not easy. And so it can be challenging to address the biggest problem in your business at any given moment. And when the mind comes up against something that's hard, the mind seeks to retreat because it's uncomfortable, it brings up negative emotions, and so the mind seeks to retreat. Great founders are those who have developed their discipline to a point where they understand they want to focus on the hardest problems in their business at any given moment. They're disciplined enough to stay focused on them, and they've disciplined their emotional reaction to, it's not that we don't have those emotions come up, it's just that we expect them to come up and continuing doing the work anyway.
I mean, focus, I feel like an ongoing battle as a founder, because especially as an entrepreneur who's creative and you're in ideation all the time, you're always wanting to try new things, and then to have that diligence and discipline to stay relentlessly focused on something. I think it's a big skill. What do you think?
It's undoubtedly a huge skill. It's everything. In my experience and in my observation, an entrepreneur will be unfocused for as long as it takes until they feel the pain of that lack of focus. And that pain might come from, I've just been a decade in business and I can't point to any measurable progress. Or that pain will come in the fact of, I just tried to go into this new market or this geography and it absolutely didn't work. And while I was doing that, my core business dropped by 25% and now we're in a loss position. And so the pain of a lack of focus will come. And often pain is our best friend as human beings, because the pain is the catalyst to rewire your brain to adopt a much more intelligent way of operating. And so it's a skill that unfortunately is often hard earned, but that pain that you endure to get there is really well worth it in the future.
Isolation. So I feel like isolation's not talked a lot about. And again, it's not part of that playbook when you sign up to become a founder. What's been your experience around isolation as a founder?
I think I'm a little bit different. might be able to relate to this, Benny. But man, I love isolation. I really do. I love solitude. You know, some of the. I'm now a besotted husband and a smitten father. And so isolation now looks a little bit different. There's three of us in the isolation bubble, which is how I love it and want it. But, you know, if we go back prior to Panda and prior to Ariella, you know, I'd be off to the Blue Mountains for 3 to 5 days at a time, completely isolated. I would take the phone, but it would remain off and in the car. And I'd have a cabin, no television, sometimes no electricity. It'd be me, a journal, a fireplace, a bed, a couch, and a 3-hour walking track around the cabin. They were the most productive days in my entire year because I would be able to pause and connect with myself and reflect on everything that was going on. It was super weird to me, man. Often I'd get to Blue Mountain. And I've been doing this for over a decade. Often I would get to the Blue Mountains and, you know, I'd literally walk into a cabin. I'd sit down. I've been there for 15 minutes and I will have solved challenges that I was carrying for the previous 3 months because all I needed was the space and the time and like also the spiritual space where my soul can kind of breathe. And then all of a sudden answers would come to me that weren't clear, you know, as little an hour and a half ago when I was driving out of Sydney. And so isolation is something that I've always sought. I'm also a massive introvert. That surprises people a lot because I never stop talking.
On the side.
Right. That's interesting. And so I spend a lot of time in front of camera, as do you. I spend a lot of time on stage. I spend a lot of time in interviews. I spend a lot of time coaching people, all that kind of stuff. And so I can obviously do extroversion, but my batteries recharge in solitude. However, if I apply that more broadly to, you know, my clients at the Entourage, for example, you know, we've got a community, a digital community of about just over 1 million business owners around the world, and we do everything from big events to helping people to scale from 6 to 7 figures, 7 to 8 figures in coaching and training programs and all of that kind of stuff. Then often business owners do seek connection with others, and that's really important. And the reason it's really important is when you're going through life and you're the only 1%er that you know, you're the only one that's wired a little bit differently and you're surrounded by 99%ers, what happens is you start to question your own inner voice and you start to think, man, am I just completely deluded? Am I stupid about this? Am I being naive? Like, what's wrong with me? And my biggest concern is that 1%ers quit because they never find other 1%ers to connect with. And so what people often talk about when they walk into one of our big unconventions, you know, there's 1,500 business owners and entrepreneurs in one room. They walk in, they start talking to other people and they go, I didn't learn that I wasn't crazy. I learned that I was crazy, but there was just 1,500 other fucking crazy people as well. So it felt like coming home. And so finding a tribe of like-minded, like-hearted people, however one does that, is really important because when you're a business owner or an entrepreneur or a property investor, you know, so many walks of life are very unique. And so you want to find people who are on a similar journey because you can, a challenge shared is a challenge halved. Final point on this. I think one of the most cathartic things that can happen to any human being is to walk into a room, and I'm talking about like a mastermind style environment, right? So it might be 6 or 8 people in a room having an honest and deep conversation. One of the most therapeutic things that can happen is you walk into a room, you table the biggest challenge that's going on for you, and then the 7 people that are sitting in the circle go, yeah, I've got the same challenge. Or yeah, I had that same challenge last year. Because what happens to us as human beings is because we do often operate so much in isolation, particularly in our mind, we're always ruminating, you know, when you're going to bed or when you're waking up or 2 a.m. in the morning or you're in your office and your team are out there and you're kind of in your office stressing out, whatever it might be. We kind of do a lot of that in isolation. And what happens when you walk into a room and table your biggest challenge that you've got the most shame about right now, and then 6 or 7 other people that you have a lot of respect for go, yeah, I've been there, or yeah, I am there. It is immediately cathartic and immediately therapeutic because you go, I'm not the only one. And so shame can only exist in shadows. And so the benefit of an inner circle and the benefit of not allowing yourself to, be in isolation for too great of a period of time is the connections and the personal breakthroughs that occur when you get around like-minded people are absolutely priceless.
Yeah, you said the word tribe before, and I think that whole notion of building that right community, we're in the same mastermind, and we were away,
Great point.
I think last year in
LA.
LA.
Yeah.
And I walked away from that going like, wow, like the conversations, just the interaction with just like-minded people, like with people who've got the same problems.
Yes.
The value exchange of learning, it's unbeatable.
Yeah. And I find my introversion actually kind of leaves the room when I'm in an environment like that, because I'm interested to hear your sort of experience as well. I think an introvert becomes significantly less introverted when you're having deep, meaningful conversations with people who get it, and so that connection and that it's just so enriching. And so you said you're an introvert as well.
Yeah, and what you just said then is interesting. I can't have like small talk which is not valuable. Like I'm allergic to it.
Yeah,
and so I walk off.
That's a really You've languaged exactly how I feel. Yeah.
So when you're when you're in a room with the people you want to be holding space with, and you're having those high value conversations, as an introvert, it lights you up.
Definitely. And perhaps that makes it an even richer experience because you're not used to having that you're not used to being lit up in those type of environments. And then when you are, it's kind of extra special.
Just rewinding back, so you form that tribe, you go to a mastermind, or you're part of a community, you're learning all this information, like we were at Dan Martell, you're learning all this great stuff. I feel like you then have to execute.
Yeah.
There's that like integration. And I feel like I've sometimes dropped the ball there where I get this great learning from an event and then I just fail to implement. Like, what do you do like typically when you absorb info from an event or from someone? You get good learning. Like, how do you go about typically after that, just making sure you take action?
In order to implement after you go to an event, you have to have an integration day immediately after the event. So if you're going to a 3-day event, you're going to schedule a 4th day. The event is Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You're going to schedule Monday as well. And Monday is you in solitude, reviewing your notes, determining your actions, making the decisions, firing off the emails to your team, getting people on the phone, asking any questions of any of your networks that you're still wrestling with in terms of how to execute it, building the project plans. And so you add a day to the event, and that's where really the rubber hits the road. That day will be more valuable than the 3 days that came before it.
I love that.
Yeah.
I've never done that.
It's the reason I started to think about that was we come together 3 or 4 times a year with our clients, and so it's like 200 of the country's best business owners and entrepreneurs, and it's like a bloody rock concert, man. Like, it's just so much fun and so much value, and the conversations, the connections that happen. What was happening was people were coming and getting like their minds blown, so much value, so much fun, and then going home with a to-do list of 1,000 things. And so we now do 2 things for that. Firstly, every single session we call an implementation session. So it's learn, do. But then also we instruct everybody to book that integration day immediately. Like, stay in the same freaking hotel. So event ends Sunday, don't fly out Sunday night, fly out Monday night. Stay in the same environment, the same hotel room, and get to work bedding down what needs to be done to implement.
Brilliant. I love that. Shifting gears, founder-led companies.
Yeah.
What's your view on it? And have you had an experience yourself around how it can work and how it can't work?
Founder-led companies are at an extreme advantage because they're able to imbue the personality and the DNA of the founder in a way that will connect with consumer and market far better than just a business brand. And so if you think of Virgin and Branson, you think of Apple and Jobs, you don't need to necessarily be the business. That's why I think Branson's a really good example. He's not the one flying the planes or writing the credit applications in Virgin Money. but he is a very good face of the brand, and you know Richard's values, and you know that they flow through everything that Virgin does with the Virgin brand. And so founder-led businesses are at an extreme advantage when they give themselves permission to be different. I think a lot of founders and founder-led businesses put a blanket over that advantage when they try and be corporate and try and be sensible and try and be like everybody else, because you've just taken your number one advantage and you've completely eradicated it.
Yes.
And so my advice to all founders is work out what makes you uniquely you. Work out how to intelligently infuse those values into the business and then turn it up, because that's what people will connect with. The nature of the question made me think of you're probably thinking about kind of strengths and weaknesses, right? I think the weakness of a founder-led business can sometimes be, not always, but sometimes, founders 80% of the time aren't great managers.
True.
They're great leaders. They're great entrepreneurs. A lot of the time, they're even great technicians in terms of like doing whatever the business does, mainly because they did all of the roles in the beginning themselves and they had to get good at it. But 80% are not good managers. And so what that means is that when the business gets to a certain point, let's say 8 figures, maybe sometimes before that, that the organization is going to require a level of management that doesn't come naturally to the founder. And at that point, the founder's got 2 options. It can learn how to manage in a more executive type fashion, or you could start building out a leadership team of professional managers who are also entrepreneurial and dynamic and represent the values of the company to head up each function, which is what I do. And so you don't need to be an exceptional manager to be a great founder. You just need to be a great founder to be a great founder.
Would you say at Entourage the org structure's flat?
Yes, it is. It's as flat as it can be with me delegating myself out of a lot of the management. And so what I've got at the Entourage is I'm founder and CEO. I've then got a leadership team, so in all of the different functions. So I've got a director of marketing, I've got a director of sales, I've got a director of coaching, I've got a director of ops and finance, I've got a director of people, I've got a director of our digital marketing agency, I've got a director of our growth agency. And so every function in the business has a highly capable, highly skilled executive driving it, who is personally accountable to deliver on the commercial results of that function every single month. And so, and then under that, it's very flat. And so, yeah, that works really well for me. For a few years, I used to actually bring on CEOs. Okay. And I no longer do that. I would prefer to have a general manager in place as opposed to a CEO. And the reason is this. The distinction that I needed to make was there's a difference between being in a position where you're able to make really informed strategic and operational decisions and being required operationally to execute. And so I don't want to do the latter. I don't want to be operationally executing. But the businesses do grow when I'm in the seat and I'm connected enough to make the strategic and operational decisions. And so I want to make the decisions and then I want to be involved but not required.
So you've hired historically a CEO to come in and replace you, of course.
Yes.
And I'm assuming that CEO's got previous experience as a CEO.
Not always.
Not always.
Not always. They've probably got a experience of being an executive elsewhere and probably inside of my organization, and they've demonstrated a high degree of capability and execution and performance, and then I'll usually promote internally. But they don't have to have been a GM or a CEO previously. They just need to demonstrate the qualities that I'm looking for in that role.
Did you notice like change of culture when you jumped out of the CEO seat?
Again, I think I'm probably pretty lucky in that instance because about 11 years ago, I started to obsess about a particular question. One of the things that I identified was that there are certain brands in the world that we as human beings connect with to a far greater degree than the business or the product or the service. And so Apple is one of those brands for me.
Yeah.
Virgin is one of those brands for me. For some people, Google might be one of those brands. Tesla is one of those brands today, right? And the question that I ask myself is, what's different about those brands than, say, a Telstra?
Yeah.
Or an Amex? Or a NAB, right? And I really thought deeply about this for a long period of time. And what I determined made these businesses different was it wasn't who they said they were. It definitely wasn't their marketing slogans. Like, we see the marketing slogans of like the big four banks, like, we live in your world. Like, bull fucking shit you do. I don't know what world you live in, but it's not the fucking same one as me, right? And so it's not what they say it is. It's not the marketing. Like, what makes these brands different? And what I determined is it's their fundamental DNA.
Yeah.
It's who they are as a business that can't be manufactured or faked. It can be captured and communicated, but it can't be manufactured or faked. And then I was like, okay, well, if I was to try and take that one level of specificity down in terms of who they are, how would I bottle that? And my best attempt at doing it back then and still today is vision, mission, values. Vision is, what's our purpose for existing beyond financial gain or anything that's self-centric? What contribution are we making to the world beyond self-gain or financial gain? What's our mission? What do we do every day in service towards the vision? And then equally as importantly, maybe most importantly, is what are our values? Who are we? Like, really, who are we? And it's not about the writing down of the vision, mission, and the values. You know, a lot of corporates have vision, mission, and values, and you can see the lack of adherence or even appreciation to the vision, mission, values. So it's not about writing down the values. It's about to what extent does the organization and everybody in it embody the values.
Yes.
And so I got really clear on all of those things 11 years ago. What that means is that you're then able to recruit people who are a vision, mission, and values alignment and who embody it. And you can start to have your vision, mission, and values infused through your marketing and through your sales process, through your customer journey. And so the way I kind of liken it, perhaps a simple way to explain it, is it's like having a self-aware organization. No different to a self-aware human being. You got a self-aware organization. And so because in the entourage, that's so deeply entrenched in who we are and how we talk and how we treat each other and the kind of clients that we love working with and the kind of results that we're determined to achieve, because that's really well set in place. Historically, when I've had a CEO come in, even if they're a little bit different to me, on the aggregate, generally speaking, the culture hasn't shifted that much just because it is.
So good.
And so there are always things to improve. We're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but we do have a very palpable culture that the team and our clients and marketplace in general seem to really resonate with.
What's a belief or strategy that you, let's say, had 5 years ago that you've completely changed your mind about?
It's probably the CEO one. You know, it's that distinction I made before is, the organization works best when I'm making the strategic and larger operational decisions, and I'm working closely with people who are able to project manage and manage the execution and the performance of those decisions. And so what I used to be guilty of is becoming too diluted in my everyday operational involvement. And so that's the big difference for me is, and here's the other thing. I freaking love it these days. I love being a CEO these days. Why? Because I'm doing it in a way that works for me. Whereas 6 years ago, 10 years ago, if I was in the CEO seat, I might try and be a proper CEO and do what proper CEOs do. And, you know, you kind of, you forget to play by your own rule book.
Yeah.
And so if I was to try and be a similar CEO to a NAB CEO or a Telstra, I would hate it. I would fucking hate it. But if I craft the role according to what I want to do, if I build a team who I am incredibly culturally aligned with and love working with every day, and I'm able to make decisions, drive performance, lead the business, shape the business, and I set everything up in my world and within that role in a way that suits Jack, not the traditional textbook of what a CEO should look like or talk like or be like, then I could do it every day of the week for the rest of my life. And so this actually comes back to your question is, man, I think the other shift that I've literally made since Ariella was born, which at this point is like less than 2 years, she's 2 this coming April, is I used to make goals and go in with a hell of a lot of energy and a hell of a lot of excitement. And so the input curve would kind of go up a lot and then it would kind of crash 3 months later. Whereas now in any goal that I set or in any role like a CEO that I assume, the number one thing I'm trying to set everything up to achieve is consistency.
Yeah.
Meaning, how would this need to look in order for me to love doing it every day for the rest of my life, right? Or most of the days for most of my life, however you want to frame the question. And it's through setting things up that way that I'm able to get the most out of myself, that I'm able to show up as the best version of myself, which in turn helps and I think is really pleasing to everybody around me. When when we as individuals can show up and we're inspired and we're juiced and we're present, we've got energy and we're connected to who we are, and so we can have compassion with everybody else and lead in a way that's inspiring. I'm able to do that when I build things according to my own rule book, not according to the traditional textbook.
I love that. Decision making. How do you go about decision making? Like, I'm assuming you're looking at a lot of different priorities, a lot of different projects. Obviously, we've got to make pretty sometimes quick decisions. Like, have you got a bit of a process that you walk through to kind of decide what you do and don't want to do?
1000%. It's my religion, right? It's my religion. And so there's a few things to that. The first thing that you have to realize is that every business operates in a resource-constrained environment. You only have so much money, you only have so much time, you only have so much knowledge, you only have so much brand. And so strategy is, how do I allocate limited resources against unlimited options? Once you understand that fundamental premise, the direct conclusion is, well, then I can't do everything at once all of the time, which is what business owners tend to want to do, right? What do you want done? Everything. When? Yesterday. It's like, okay, cool. And that comes from a good place. That comes from a place of I'm in a hurry, and I'm optimistic, and I want to achieve a lot. The problem is that when we try to do everything, we end up doing nothing, or at least nothing well, and it slows us down. So counterintuitively, for a lot of type A personalities, it's the desire to go fast which ultimately slows us down. And so if you adopt the view that I can only focus on 1 or 2 or maybe 3 things at any given moment, you then go, okay, what should you focus on? All I am ever interested in is what are the top 1 to 2 constraints in this business right now. And then I build the initiatives that are going to unlock those core 1 to 2 constraints. And so
powerful.
I delegate pretty much everything except what's the biggest problem in the business right now. And so if you imagine a business is an assembly line, I'm looking for where is the biggest roadblock in the assembly line.
Yep.
And then I go deep into that and I micromanage that and I fix that until it is done, and then I don't need to be involved anymore. But because I've delegated everything else is working well. It's working by definition better than whatever I'm working on at the moment. It's being managed by other people who are really capable managers. I'm able to go deep on the hardest problem at any given moment until it is done, and then I move on to the next hardest problem.
Brilliant. I love that. Toughest decision. Like, what would you say is like one of the toughest decisions you've had to make that has shaped who you are today?
Yeah, that's a really good question. In 2016, 17, 18 were the hardest years of my life. I founded Entourage in 2010. By 2015, we were a $50 million brand. At that point, we had a line of parents and students, lining up to be like, little Janie finishes high school next year. Can she come and study at the Entourage? And we're like, well, no, because we don't. We exist for business owners. We work for business owners to help them scale. And so after a lot of demand, we eventually became a college, and we came into the vocational education and training space here in Australia. Entered the space incredibly successfully. We were industry's best in terms of like student outcomes and student results and student retention, all the things that matter. But there were some dodgy providers in that sector that were kind of taking advantage of government funding, because it works like hex, right? Like government funds the student pays it back when they start earning over a certain amount of money. And so the government essentially wiped out that industry in an attempt to send everybody back to university and TAFE, which was not a good thing to do in my opinion. For us, that meant we were losing about $600,000 a month. It meant I was 3 months away from losing $900,000 a month.
Wow.
At a team of 90. We'd just been listed as the fourth best place to work in Australia. And so we were in real trouble. It's probably an understatement. It's the most distressed I've ever seen any business firsthand. Like if you look at Tesla and SpaceX in 2008, they had more zeros on their losses than we did. But in terms of like businesses that I've actually seen firsthand, I've never seen a business that distressed. We were, I was meeting with liquidators and administrators, people who wind up businesses, and they're all saying the same thing. They're all saying, Jack, you can't trade out of this. Like you're done. Raise the white flag, put the keys on the table, exit stage left, hope nobody notices. And there's just something in my head that said, no, I refuse that reality. I'm going to fight. And so such begun the hardest 3 or 4 years of my life. One of the things that we needed to do immediately was bring our cost base down. And the way to do that primarily is through headcount. And so to come back to your question in terms of the hardest decision is we needed to go from 90 people to 40 people, and we needed to do it in a matter of days. And so that was extremely challenging. That wasn't going to solve our problem in and of itself, but it was going to buy me about 2 to 3 weeks to get busy so that I could solve the problem. In those instances, it's like either 50 people lose their jobs or everyone loses their jobs. Yep. And so this is the really important thing, I think, for everybody to understand, not just founders, but anybody that might be watching on, is when a business is going through a hard time, there are no good decisions. Yeah. There is only the least bad decision you can make out of a long list of really fucking bad decisions. And so you'll make decisions and people will go, that was a bad decision. And you go, yeah, it was a bad decision, but it was the least bad decision I could have made given the circumstances. And so it was probably the first period of my life where I had to make really hard calls. And then, you've got 5 lawsuits on at any given moment, because when you're not able to pay your creditors, everyone starts suing you. And, we owed the bank millions of dollars. We had invoice factoring. I owed the ATO a hell of a lot of money. And so you get lawsuits. And so you go from I went from peacetime to wartime literally overnight, because I found out about the funding change on the front page of the newspaper when we walked into the office the same time everybody else in the country did. And so I'd never been a wartime CEO before. And so you need to make decisions that you ideally would never need to make in your entire life. But you need to develop this kind of, I was speaking to a coach many years later when I was trying to kind of resolve the PTSD that I was carrying from that period. And I was saying, a lot of the time I felt out of integrity, terminating 50 people that had shown loyalty to the organization. And she put it so beautifully, man. She said, Jack, you had to develop a hierarchy of integrity. Mm. And I thought, fuck, that's a powerful model to think about it. And it's a hierarchy of integrity, because it's like, if I don't do this, then this will happen. And that scenario is worse than this scenario, so it's better if I make the decision. And so, yeah, that was the most challenging period of my life, but it made me significantly better in every which way. 3-4 years later, We had paid off every single dollar that we owed. The business was better and more successful and profitable than it had ever been prior. And so it all worked out.
Yeah.
But it was hard.
You said the liquidator basically said close up, and you said I don't want to accept. You said that reality.
Yes.
Is that like intuition? Like, what was that? Just ego as an entrepreneur? Like, what was going on there? Because that's like, it's fascinating that you felt that and then you executed on that and rebuilt it.
Felt that is the perfect way to put that, man. There was two things for me. So to go back to my childhood, when I was about 4 or 5 years of age, my parents ran a not-for-profit organization called Breaking the Cycle, and they'd take youth at risk off the street, out of jails, from abusive homes. They'd put them through a 3-month training program, and then they'd facilitate them into employment. And even though they deliberately chose the people from the most challenging of backgrounds, they were the best at what they did in the country. And so that's the environment I grew up in. It was a not-for-profit. Government changed the way they issued capital out to not-for-profits. Organization collapsed.
Wow.
My family lost all their money. 2016-17 was the same script.
Played out.
It was the exact same thing. It was like an intergenerational pattern. And so in that moment when they were saying you can't trade out of this, what was going through the feeling was I do not accept that reality and I don't need to accept that reality. I understand that's how it looks on paper, but I will create something differently. That was the feeling. That was the intuition. And the head was, I'm not letting that happen again. I got to break that cycle.
Wow, it's like epigenetics, like just repeating itself.
Dude, it was crazy. It's parallel. Yeah.
I want to talk a bit about scaling and leadership. So
Great.
You've obviously grown Entourage into a very successful company. Like I've been part of high growth as well, and it comes with challenges.
Yeah.
Good learning.
Yeah.
Like what are some of the fundamental lessons that you've come up with in your time, just like as you're growing with the growing pains? Like what are some of the lessons that you've observed and encountered during that, where you're like, hey, I'm not going to fucking repeat that again?
The main and most persistent one, we spoke about focus before, and we spoke about how it's hard earned. That was true for me as well in my own journey. And so it's, I think every kind of entrepreneur and business owner and business kind of does this until you don't. You kind of go broad and you start doing a lot of things, and then you go, hey, this isn't working, and then you bring it in and you focus again, then you do that for a couple of years, you go, man, this is working incredibly well, let's do 6 other things, and then you go broad, and so it's kind of this process of going divergent, convergent, divergent, convergent, divergent. And so I think that's probably the most persistent and recurring lesson is the principle that focus is always the best strategy.
Yes.
Until you have a business that is growing sustainably without your operational involvement, then you might add one other thing to it. You might add another business to the group, or you might start another business altogether, but not to do it too soon. The basics need doing, the work needs doing, and often for entrepreneurs, the less we do by way of breadth, the more we do in terms of depth.
Yes. I mean, I've broke culture a few times growing, like sometimes hiring just even just one wrong person who's cancer comes in and just fucking fucks it.
Yep.
How have you been able to, I know you were talking earlier about, it seems like you've really built your mission, your vision, values as part of the fabric.
Yep.
But how have you maintained culture as you guys have been growing quite aggressively? One
of the things vision, mission, values allows us to do is be very clear about who we are and who we are not. And so in any recruitment process, my team can spot a mile away who is and who isn't a fit. Man, once you have that, it's just a gift that keeps on giving because the culture becomes self-perpetuating. And so that really is where it starts. It starts with becoming a self-aware organization, determining who are we and who are we not. Secondly, we put a lot of emphasis on recruitment. we spend more time on recruitment than perhaps any other business that I know of. And does that make it harder? Yes. Does that make it significantly slower? Yes. Does that mean we've got other fires in the business that are burning while we are running a long and thorough recruitment process? Yes. Does that mean sometimes we don't find the right person for 3 or 4 or 5 months? Yes. And so here's the thing. In business, as you know better than anybody, Benny, there are no solutions. Yeah. There are only trade-offs. And so it's not like we have to recruit quickly to solve these problems. It's like, well, those are the problems that you know about. But by recruiting the wrong person quickly, you're just kicking the can down the road, and you're going to have different problems 3 months later. You're then probably going to need to get rid of that person, and go through the whole cycle again. Mm-hmm. And so the business and the person that looks for shortcuts is always the person that takes the longest, because the shortcut doesn't get you there. Yeah. And so the hard way and the slow way is often the fast way. Yes. And we apply that to recruitment in every way, shape, or form. And so, and then we do have. So it's like, if you think about defining who you are, recruitment, bringing in the right people, and then the third thing is making sure there is an operating rhythm where leadership and management is ingrained in the day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month of the business. And so I'll give you a few examples of that. We operate on 90-day sprints. Yeah. And so we set OKRs over a 90-day time horizon that ensures that we're going to hit our 12-month roadmap. Within that 90 days, I do what we call a founder's address, probably it's between every kind of 1 or 2 months, or it might be every 6 weeks, depending on how I feel. Depending on what I feel the team needs, I should say, not on how I feel. And the founder's address is 90 minutes or 2 hours, and all that founder's address is designed to do is to get everybody up out of the operations of the business and get my team reconnected with why they're here.
I like that.
And so I either do that through talking about our vision, mission, and values, or one of the three, or I talk about how did we perform last quarter and where are we going next quarter and over the next 12 months, because even that, it sounds a bit kind of target-driven or performance-orientated, but it's still a really good breath of fresh air for the team to put their head up and go, okay, where have we come from? Where are we going? Often the best founders' addresses, not just for my business, but for other businesses that we've coached to do this, are consumer-orientated, where you actually bring in our case, it's a client or two, and I'll interview them in front of the team in terms of like, where were you before? What helped you about coming through the Entourage, and what are the results that you've achieved? And we'll have that conversation for half an hour, and then the team can ask questions as well. And that reconnects them to the outcomes of what we do. And so it doesn't really matter what you do in your founder's address, so long as it reconnects them to the why.
So good. I love that.
And then we do weekly team meetings on every Monday morning. Usually that's about looking at the week that's coming up and the rest of the month and what we need to do to hit targets. Every person in the organization has a one-on-one with their direct manager every single week. And so even just that, 90-day sprints, founders' addresses every 4 to 8 weeks, depending on what the team needs, Monday morning meetings, one-on-ones. I do a leadership meeting with my leadership team every 2 weeks. I do one-on-ones with my leadership team every other week. And so every week I'm either in a leadership meeting or I'm doing one-on-ones with my leadership team. That's the rhythm. And so that keeps everybody aligned and directed and united and making the right decisions and heading in the right direction. And that is a huge aspect that not just sustains culture, but helps build culture.
You mentioned the word leadership a few times. When you hear the word leadership, what comes to mind for you?
What immediately comes to mind for me is inspiration. And there's so much more to leadership than just inspiration, as I learned through 2016 and 17. Inspiration is kind of the fun part of the leadership equation. But I think at its essence, that's kind of where one should be aiming. And I also think it's one that often gets lost, because I think a lot of people mistake leadership for management. Yeah. And they're not the same thing.
Very different.
Very different.
Yeah.
And so we've got a business world where a lot of businesses, particularly medium to large scale, have management frameworks that are almost too suffocating. So they've gone too far on the management, and they're completely devoid of leadership. Nobody knows why the fuck the business exists. Nobody knows why are we all doing this other than a paycheck or a profit at the end of the quarter or the end of the fortnight.
Yeah.
And so when, you ask, when I hear the word leadership, I honestly think of Nelson Mandela. I think of Steve Jobs. I think of J.K. Rowling. It's like, Jack, she wrote Harry Potter. What does she do for anybody? J.K. Rowling is credited for doing more for childhood literacy than any other person in history. I think of Oprah Winfrey, and so I think the more we can bring inspiration back into leadership, the more powerful we can be.
What's your view on work-life balance as an entrepreneur? There's this whole, culture around, working hard and, just basically grind. I know it's changing a bit now, but I guess how have you dealt with work-life balance? Like, what's your experience been?
Work-life balance positions work as the enemy.
Yeah.
I don't distinguish between work and life. To me, it's all just living. And the more I can integrate it, the more I enjoy my work and the more I enjoy my life more holistically. And so I don't believe in work-life balance. I believe in work-life integration.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's a good way to look at it. Because
well, you're the same, right? I mean, you might use different language, but I imagine you're very similar.
Like, for example, for me last year, so 2024, I had pretty much a bit of an open diary where I didn't have a lot going on.
Because you'd sold out of your business.
No, this is Buyer's Agent Institute.
Right.
So I don't have a lot on during the day. Like, my diary's not stacked.
Yeah.
It's quite free. And I got inspired by Jeff Weiner from LinkedIn, the former CEO.
Yep.
He always used to talk about he used to try and have an empty diary as much as he could so he could think, like you said, when you're in the Blue Mountains.
Exactly what I do, yeah.
Solve problems.
Yep.
But then I suffered, interesting, last year, like a lot of boredom. I didn't fill my cup up correctly and kind of lost my mojo a bit. And so I feel like, I don't know, for me, it's been a bit of a challenge to, like, you said the word integration and like how to bring it all together, because on one hand, you're supposed to feel like I've got to be working, I've got to be productive.
Yes.
I've got to be solving problems, got to be doing everything. And then if you're not doing that, you feel a bit guilty. Like, my team's doing it all.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I've personally found it a bit challenging.
Yeah. That's a really valuable thing to share. Slight tangent, but what's interesting, and perhaps the people watching or listening to this might also benefit from this observation. I don't know what it was, but to my observation, the conversations that I'm having, even in the mastermind that we are both in, that we spoke about earlier, I reckon a lot of people, I want to say everyone, had a really challenging year last year.
Yeah.
And so I think it's I think sometimes it can be good to know that other people are going through challenges as well, which is why I think what you're sharing is so powerful.
Yeah.
Because we live in a world and a culture where, everybody looks at Instagram for the baseline as to what I should expect from my day-to-day reality. And it's a fucking terrible barometer because you're just seeing all the highlight reels that are edited and manufactured and just bullshit. And so, I think when somebody shares like what you just did, dude, the same was true for Panda and I. Is we had a couple of false starts with some pregnancies, which is never fun, as you may well know. There was it was a really challenging time, and so anyway, it's a long-winded way of saying I've been interested to observe that it's been a pretty universal pattern that last year was a challenging one.
Do you find like a lot of these business owners that are in, customers of Entourage or people that are struggling to like get that balance because they're so deep in the business? They're not maybe spending time with their daughter or their wife. They're neglecting that. Like, yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. And so, while I know this isn't the case in your instance, I think what happens with, I know what happens with a lot of business owners is the problem always starts here. People do not understand that how they manage their calendar and what they spend their time doing is their most valuable resource and determines their life. And so when it goes unaudited, what people end up doing every day are the things that don't move the needle in their business or their career, are the things that don't bring them joy or happiness, are the things that don't recharge their batteries, are the things that don't rejuvenate them. And they're kind of on autopilot living through default. And so one of the first things I do with people is we audit the calendar and we delegate or outsource anything that doesn't move the needle and doesn't light them up and doesn't help them rest. Because even if, I was having a conversation with a couple of, like 7-figure business. I was doing about $6 million in revenue. And every Sunday they're spending, they've 3 kids, but every Sunday they're spending their Sunday doing chores, whether it's mowing the lawn or doing all the laundry or, cleaning the kitchen and running the dishwashers and all of this kind of stuff. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that unless you're doing $6 million a year with a good margin.
Yep.
And then I would rather you have somebody come into your home part-time, delegate the stuff that you don't need to be doing, not so that you can work on a Sunday, but so that you can rest on a Sunday.
Yeah.
So that come Monday, I'm getting the best version of you. And so it all comes back to, like, we often want to people talk about their values. And it's like, I don't need you to tell me your values. I'm going to look at your bank statement. I'm going to look at your calendar and they're going to tell me your values.
Yeah.
What you spend your money on and what you spend your time on is what you currently are demonstrating that you value. And so when you go through that consciously and somebody gets it reflected back to them, they're like, I'm actually not living life how I thought I was living life.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's true. That's the truth bomb.
Yeah, that's the truth bomb.
Wow. That's the mirror. Would you say Entourage is like education coaching or coaching? Like, how would you, like, would it be just defined as coaching or education coaching? Like,
I used the word education when we became a college because it better described what we did then. I don't use the word education anymore. Entourage is primarily coaching. And so we have teams of coaches who have been in business, who are in business, who are highly successful, who have been there, done that experience, and who have deep specialties in different areas of business.
Yeah.
And so the coach that you are connected with at any given moment in Entourage is according to what are the greatest constraints you're working on right now. And so if you need to sit down with somebody and develop a game plan and start deploying ads on Facebook and Instagram, we'll help you do that. If you need to set up retargeting or nurtures to better nurture your leads to move them through your funnel, there's a coach to help you do that. If you need to build your sales process, if you sell through conversation, or you need to optimize your landing page, you need some CRO, there's coaches to help you do that. If you want to improve your onboarding or your customer journey to extend lifetime value, there's coaches to help you do that. And so that's why today it's called the Entourage, is because all we're doing is bringing together really intelligent people to scale businesses, usually from $1 to $20 or $30 million. And we do that very systematically and in a way that's very focused and helps the entrepreneur fight their entrepreneurial ADHD to go and work on 1,000 things. Which is the other thing people are really surprised with us is when you come into the Entourage, you don't do more. You actually do significantly less than what you were doing previously. Because if I can't take 10 or 20 hours out of your week and help you delegate it or outsource it, even if you need to generate more revenue in order to do that, then I'm not really doing my job. And so that's where we start. More money, more time, more freedom. And then we help them unlock the constraint on the way to scale. We do that primarily through coaching. There's a training element, and then there's a huge community element. And so if you imagine those 3 circles kind of overlapping, that's how our members have been able to achieve the results that they have.
Do you think about like the future of coaching then, and like
all the time?
What are those potential threats, and how you guys are going to future-proof what you're doing?
All the time. I don't think AI is going to replace coaching in the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
I think AI is going to superpower coaches in the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
And so it's more about how do we best utilize and integrate AI in order to make ourselves better and more efficient and to help our clients get results faster.
AI, it's such a
Huge.
big topic, right?
Yeah.
I'm not fully across it, and like, how do you go about as a business? I'm just curious for my own sake, like trying to work out these potential solutions for AI. Like, there's just so much tech in that area. Like,
Yeah.
is there like someone that you specifically will speak to as an expert, or a group of experts, or are you like searching online? Like, what are you doing to try and work it out?
That's a really good question. And one thing I'd really like to say about AI right now, particularly at a small to medium-sized business level, is the amount of discussion and let's call it hype that's around it
Yeah.
far outweighs the practical applications that are going to help your business move faster or make more money this quarter. It's certainly not to say that there's not things that you can do in AI right now that, will help improve your business. But it's not. And again, there's AI geeks out there that'll say Jack is completely wrong on that. Absolutely, there is. It's like, show me a traditional small to medium sized business right now, because this will change in 2 years.
Yeah.
But right now, show me the average small to medium sized business that's been revolutionized by AI adoption. There aren't any.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, we try and integrate it into each function of business, and it's really useful and it's really cool, and the potential for where it goes is going to be super interesting. But as and where we stand right now, I think it's more about integrating and utilizing the things that you find relatively simple and relatively easy so that you get comfortable with it, your team gets comfortable with it, the kind of fabric of your business gets comfortable with it, so that as it escalates and as it increases, that ramp is a little bit easier for you, because at a human level and a psychological level, you've gotten used to the adoption of it.
Yes.
And you've started to see some results from it. And so you've befriended it rather than seeing it as a threat.
Do you use ChatGPT or something?
All the time.
Yeah.
For almost everything. Literally everything. Journaling, therapy, strategy, training, nutrition plans, scheduling, development like content or projects, communication, marketing, sales, everything.
Would it be hard to go back to the old way?
It wouldn't be hard, but I would definitely notice it. It would be, I would feel like I had lost a co-pilot.
If you're a business owner listening to this, and let's say you're not curious about AI at a starting point, is that a problem?
If you're not curious about AI and you're nervous about it, that's not a problem. It's universally understandable because it is scary and it is such an unknown, and the speed of it's going to be quick. For people who are in that camp, what I encourage them to do, and what worked really well for me, is just start using ChatGPT and just chat to it the way you would a friend or a coach or whoever. And the minute you start to get some useful, practical, applicable output from it that makes your life better, that's when you go from nervousness to optimism and excitement, because you're like, I actually spoke to it about A, B, and C, and it gave me some useful suggestions, and I went away and did them, and they actually really work. The minute you get that one positive feedback loop is when you will start to befriend it and be less scared of it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You said journaling before. Do you journal every day?
Not every day. It's been interesting for me to observe myself lately around this is I will go through periods where I will journal every single morning. And then I will go through periods where I might journal once a week or once every couple of weeks. And I'm often observing myself, right? It's like going, what the fuck's going on there? Like, what's up with that? And so I've only just kind of reflected on this the last couple of weeks. What it is for me is when I'm processing a lot, mentally or emotionally or commercially or in any aspect or area of my life, I will often wake up and I start journaling straight away. When I feel really clear and clean in terms of I'm not carrying any emotional gunk or intellectual debt, I'm feeling light, then I will journal less because I don't have the need for it. And so, yeah, it will kind of rise and fall according to, because for me, it's a processing tool. For me, it's my therapy. And so it will rise and fall according to how much I have to process.
Last question. So the business coaching world's competitive, right?
It is these days, yeah.
Yeah.
When I started Entourage in 2010 because there was nothing.
Yeah.
And so, and like that continued to be true up until relatively recently, like maybe like 2018-ish is when it probably started to change. And then 2 or 3 years ago, you know, these days every man and his dog is a business coach. and so it's become very saturated. Yeah.
But you guys have got such a good brand that I think you've done your time with that brand equity.
Yeah, and I'd like to. Yes, we do, and I'd like to think that what differentiates us is our ability to help you get results quickly. Like, I'm here to fucking win, and I'm here to make you win. And it just so happens I've got 20 years of experience in both winning in my own businesses and investments, and helping other business owners win in their businesses and their investments. And so we're just very good at it. You know, if somebody is doing anywhere from $200K to say $10 to $15 million in revenue, and that is a pretty broad range, and they get started with us and move into our ecosystem, I would be extremely confident that 99 times out of 100 they will get significantly better results than they would with anybody else.
Jack, good to chat.
Benny, that was really good to chat, man.
Good
Thank
to
you
hold
very
space.
much. That was great to hang. Thanks,
Thank you,
man.
brother.
Appreciate it.